Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be talking about how Donald Trump's high approval rating could potentially impact the 2028 presidential election in a positive way for Republicans and a bit negative for Democrats with the electoral map. But before we get started with this video, make sure you guys are subscribed, click the bell so you don't miss all my content, press the like button, share this video. Don't forget, if you're interested, we have memberships. You can find a link to that in the description section. So as of right now, as of February 13th, which is the last time they updated this on 538, Donald Trump is proved of by a net positive 3.5 percentage points at exactly 49% approval, as you can see on the screen, to his disapproval rating, which is, you can argue, a little bit high, but still not that bad, at 45.7%. And this is indeed higher than his approval rating at this exact point in time back in his first term from 2017. So as of right now, in his second term, he has a higher approval rating compared to his first term, which is a good sign for Republicans. Now, it is also true that it is actually slowly decreasing, because if you actually go back to February 5th, it was at 4.5%. But fast forward just 7 days later, a week later, it already went down to just 3.3% at February 12th. So it is actually decreasing. And then February 10th, for example, is at 5.2%. And now, February 13th, it's at 3.4. So yes, even though it's high, it is decreasing, but still better than his first term, and it is pretty good for Donald Trump. And it is higher, I believe, than Joe Biden. Tell me if I'm wrong. But how will this, impact the 2028 electoral map? Let's just say J.D. Vance were to win the Republican nomination over, let's just say, Ron DeSantis or some other Republican candidate. And let's just say the Democrats nominate Gavin Newsom. In my opinion, Gavin, at this point in time, probably has the second or third best chance at winning the nomination behind, I would say, Josh Shapiro or Gretchen Whitmer, for example. But I do think Newsom does have high chances, so this is very realistic in my opinion. So the states filled in gray are the true battleground states. Obviously, New Jersey is no longer a solid blue state, as we all know. And obviously, Ohio and Iowa are solid Republican states. J.D. Vance, that's his home state of Ohio, so that's not going to be close at all. Florida has shifted too far, to the right, so that won't be close at all. Texas was a solid red state, surprisingly, in the 2024 election. So I can imagine it will be likely comfortable for J.D. Vance, which is why we won't cover those issues. So let's begin with the likely states for Gavin Newsom. I think New Mexico obviously is a likely state for the Democrats in 2028, no matter the candidate, because I think this state has shifted too far to the left. Donald Trump lost it by about 6.5 percentage points versus Kamala Harris in the 2024 election. It was not close. Republicans keep thinking to themselves that they can somehow make this state within like a couple points. That's just not going to happen. That's not reality. That's the same thing as the Democrats saying they can make Texas a blue state. Like, that's not going to happen with New Mexico. It's going to remain a very blue state, in my opinion. And then you have the state of New Jersey. I do think this will be a likely Democratic state. Now, I went to Harris by a little bit over 5 percentage points. I do think that Newsom is a slightly improvement from her in terms of candidate quality. But still, I do think New Jersey will go blue by about 6 points in the 2028 presidential election. And then you have the likely states for J.D. Vance. I think there honestly is just going to be one, and that's Texas. So now everything else is going to be either lean or tilt. So, the lean states for Gavin Newsom is going to be the state of Minnesota, the state of Virginia, and the state of New Hampshire. Those three states I have lean Democrat in 2028. If Donald Trump keeps his approval rating very high, if his approval rating remains high going forward as we get closer to 2028, this is how I see the electoral map, how that would look like. So Minnesota, honestly, I think is not going to go to a Republican in a very long time. If Donald Trump ran for 3 straight presidential elections and he won Minnesota 0 times, I honestly think no Republican can do better than Donald Trump in Minnesota. J.D. Vance, I mean, you can maybe make the case that because he's not, he is a populist, so, him and Donald Trump are pretty much the same thing. I don't think that's going to make a difference. And therefore, I have Newsom winning Minnesota by about 4 percentage points. That's the margin I have it at 4. And then you have New Hampshire. This state, in my opinion, is actually getting bluer. Kamala Harris did pretty well in this state. In my opinion, she won it by almost 3%. I have Newsom winning New Hampshire in 2028 against J.D. Vance by probably around 4.5, maybe 4 to 5 percentage points. As a lot of college-educated voters, that group specifically really does well for Democrats. But you have J.D. Vance, who is a younger candidate, similar to Gavin Newsom. I think he can, make inroads in New Hampshire, which is why it won't, shift too far to the left. So he will basically stop the bleeding, and that's why it will be a little bit, closer, but not as close as it was in 2024 because Newsom is a slight improvement compared to Kamala Harris. And then you have Virginia. I also view this state as a left trending state. I do think Virginia's getting bluer as the future goes on. I don't think it's going to get redder. I mean, Republicans thought Trump actually had the chance of winning it in 2024, and Kamala Harris actually overperformed the average polling. So she won Virginia by over 5 points, which actually surprised me. I thought it would be closer than that. She actually did better than expected, which goes to show you how much of a blue state Virginia really is. And keep in mind that Glenn Youngkin at this time in 2028 will not be the governor, I believe, in this state. So he's not here to help J.D. Vance as he did to Trump, which I think will cause the state to, shift further to the left. So I have Newsom winning it by, about 5.5 percentage points, similar to Kamala Harris's margin, regardless if Trump's approval rating remains high or not. I still see Virginia as a blue state. And then the lean states for J.D. Vance will be Nevada, the Sunbelt state of Arizona, Georgia as well, and North Carolina. Those are the 4 lean states I have for J.D. Vance if Donald Trump's approval rating remains very high as we get closer to 2028. Let's start off with Nevada. Kamala Harris only won the Vegas area or Clark County by just 2 percentage points. And I believe she still managed to win Washoe County, but I think this state is trending towards the right, and therefore J.D. Vance is going to win it. But not by the amount Trump did, by 3 points. I think it will be closer than that. I just think because there's a lot of Californians who moved to Nevada, it will trend the state red, and considering that Gavin Newsom obviously is the governor of California, and there's quite a lot of people literally fleeing that state and going to places not only like Nevada, but also Florida as well, which is why I have that state heavily rejecting Gavin Newsom in 2028 in this scenario, but also places like Texas as well, which will shift those states further to the right if Newsom becomes the nominee on the Democratic side. So I have J.D. Vance winning Nevada by 2 percentage points, and Republicans have made huge improvements among Hispanic voters. Trump actually won Hispanic men, I believe, by 10 points. And the overall vote, including women, was actually 45, I believe, to 55 for Kamala Harris. So Republicans have made tremendous gains among Hispanic voters. And we go to Arizona. Now, I could see this getting very close in 2020. The only reason why is because the border issue won't be as big as it was in 2024 because Trump would calm this issue down. But still, I actually see J.D. Vance doing better than Trump in Arizona because he's not as extreme as Donald Trump, but still because he's that your average populist type candidate, he might not do as good. Now, I know Trump won it by so much, but Arizona is that one state that loves, moderate, I wouldn't say moderate, I would say establishment type of candidates, the McCain-style voters, the neocons, the Mitt Romneys of Arizona. So they reject that populism that J.D. Vance and Trump brings to the table. But because Trump proved that he can win it by so much, I can honestly see J.D. Vance doing the same thing. And then you have Georgia. I actually think a Democrat can win this state on the presidential level in 2028. If the Democrats nominate someone like Josh Shapiro, the strongest candidate in my opinion, and if the Republicans nominate, not the best candidate, then I honestly can see Georgia going blue in 2028. I mean, they have 2 Democratic senators, so why wouldn't it go blue? But I think J.D. Vance, similar to Arizona, actually does better than Donald Trump in the state of Georgia because I would say he's less extreme. And in Georgia, obviously, their governor's Brian Kemp, who some people would call, I wouldn't say moderate, but he is kind of part of the establishment. He's obviously not populist at all. So because JD Vance is similar to Donald Trump, just like a populist, maybe that will bring the state extremely closer. But if it's Gavin Newsom, he's not gonna. I mean, he's not a strong candidate. So I see Georgia going to Vance by a couple percent, and then you have North Carolina. I don't see this state moving at all. I think JD Vance would probably win this by like 2 to 3%. If it's Gavin Newsom, he's a weak candidate. I mean, it's really true. I mean, he always wins in California, but I mean, he's very unpopular. His approval ratings are always in the gutter. The only reason why he wins is because he has a D next to his name. Other than that, he is not popular at all outside of his own home state. And even his own home state doesn't really like him. They only vote for him because he has a D next to his name, which is why it looks like his victories are so big, even though he's only winning because of that D. They don't really like him at all. That's the truth. And then you have the three Rust Belt states to close off this video: Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. That will determine who wins the 2028 election, as those three blue wall states always determine who wins. So I think Wisconsin has a decent chance of actually flipping back to the Democrats in 2028. I have Wisconsin tilt blue for Newsom in this scenario. And I know JD Vance is a Rust Belt candidate. He will perform better in the Rust Belt. Gavin Newsom is not from the Rust Belt. He's obviously from the West Coast. So I think JD Vance has the advantage. Clearly, he has the upper hand. But I'm going to give Wisconsin to Gavin because I think this state is the bluest. Obviously, it was in 2024 of the three. It voted to the left of Michigan and Pennsylvania, which was surprising to a lot of people, including myself. It went to Trump by only 0.8 percentage points when Michigan and Pennsylvania both went to Trump by well over 4.5%. Or not well over, but, over 4.5%. So it goes to show you that Wisconsin, is a little bluer than the rest of those, Rust Belt states. And then I also have Michigan going back to the Democrats in 2028 because the main reason why Trump won the state was because of the Gaza issue. A lot of them actually did not trust Kamala Harris at all, but little did they know that Trump is even more far to the right when it comes to, Israel and Gaza, whatever you want to call it. So I think a lot of those voters will regret voting for Trump. Places like Dearborn, Michigan really did not do well for Democrats in 2024. I can see them going back to them, or not really going back to them, but they definitely won't vote for Trump or, JD Vance, because obviously he's part of the Trump administration and he's not really keeping his promises. I mean, if you look at what he's trying to do with Gaza, that's not really, friendly to those Michigan voters that voted for him for the first time because the Biden administration was just that bad and made Kamala Harris look bad as well. But I think it really depends on how the 2026 midterms would look like. I mean, we saw in 2022, the 2026 midterms could be a little bit of an example of how the 2028 election could play out. Or it may not, just like 2022 was not an example of how the 2024 election played out. It was a little bit, it honestly broke apart from the tradition because Republicans were just so bad at nominating their candidates. Maybe the Democrats do the exact same thing. They do bad in 2026, just how the Republicans did bad in 2022, but end up winning on the general election level in 2028, just how the Republicans did in 2024. Let's just say, for example, they nominate, Pete Buttigieg for Michigan's Senate race, and they end up losing. That's the same thing with Republicans, for example, nominating Herschel Walker in Georgia back in 2022. But then they do better in the general election in 2028, which is why I can see them winning both Michigan and Wisconsin. So don't get me wrong, Mike Rogers can still win in the 2026 midterms as a Republican in Michigan, but Democrats can still win it in the general election in 2028. Same thing, 2022, you compare it to 2024. That's just an example I wanted to put out. Now, this is where I think JD Vance will do very well in the Rust Belt. I think Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is by far, clearly, the reddest Rust Belt state of the three. It voted to the right of, Michigan and Wisconsin. A lot of that had to do with Trump's failed assassination attempt. It really boosted his turnout. It drove a lot of voters to the polls. And obviously, the Amish got to turn out really high, which you don't normally typically expect in general elections. But I have JD Vance winning 287 electoral votes to Gavin Newsom's 251 in this scenario if Donald Trump's approval rating manages to stay high as we get closer to 2028. But that's pretty much it. Let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comment section down below. What states you agree with or disagree with. and why? And do you believe Trump's approval rating will collapse, or will it remain high as we get closer to 2026 or 2028? One last fine reminder is to subscribe, click the bell so you don't miss all my content, press the like button, share this video. Don't forget we have memberships. You can find the links to that in the description section if you are interested. That's pretty much it. Thank you everyone for watching.